So hello everyone. Again, I've come up with another session of what we call as the economy mains answer writing program. And in this session, we are going to discuss one of the major topics that's been again repeatedly asked by the UPSC over and over again. And it's a quite important theme when it comes to our GS1, GS2, GS3, 4 examination and essay examination out there. So, sir, when you look at the syllabus out there, one of the important themes is that it is agriculture and problems related to the agriculture. It's been a major theme. It's been tremendously liked by the UPSC. It's been asked over and over again. But all these stuff, you need to know what's been going on in the agriculture, there is the problem out there. So of course, you need to understand that this is an important theme out there. That needs to be addressed from its root cause. Again, when you look at the agriculture out there, it is not only restricted to the GS3 examination, it is restricted to GS1, GS2, GS4, even in your essay examination. And if you're coming from a humanities background or you have a humanities option out there, you can even use this content to explain certain things out there as well. So I hope you love this. I hope you got this point out there. So let's begin this. So Indian agriculture, dual challenges of income and sustainability. As we have earlier what we called as a doubling of farmers' income 2022, doubling of farmers' income or 2022, which we haven't received, which we haven't fulfilled as of now. Again, a lot of problems were there, elections were there, all of these stuffs were there, but that's not the problem. We have missed the chance of doubling the farmers' income by 2022. That was the target that we have missed it. It was a miss shot. Out there. So let's read this. Indian agriculture, dual challenges. What are the challenges out there for the Indian agriculture? Dual challenges for income and sustainability. So first of all, there has been a variety of challenges out there. So if you talk, it is fragmented land holding. It is the fragmented land holding out there. What's fragmented land holding? Let me explain you. Take an example of a farmer out there. As you know, there is more than 80% of farmers. More than 80% of farmers are small. 80% of farmers are small. So as a result, they have less than 2 hectares out there. And as you can see, 1 hectare is nothing but it is related to the 2.73 acres. 2.73 acres out there. Now, sir, imagine if there is a small land holdings across village side, there will be no economies of scale that will be applicable. Economies of scale will get compromised. Economies of scale will get compromised. Economies of scale will get compromised. What is economies of scale? Sir, economies of scale is nothing but you reduce down the cost when you're producing in a bulk. You reduce down the cost when you're producing certain thing in a bulk. For example, if you go to what we call as a wholesale market out there, you purchase all of the things at bulk out there. You purchase maximum things at bulk out there. So what's the reason for that? The reason for that because you can discount at that. So obviously bulking of things and wholesaling of things improves efficiency, it brings down the cost, as well as it offers you a discount to the customers. So again, economies of scale has been compromised. You can't produce too much quantity, yet the cost involved is same. For example, take an example of that. I'll give you certain hint about this. If there is in Gurdwara, there is agar tawa garam hai, then you put a lot of rotis over that. Probably if you only put limited amount of rotis over this, it will produce limited amount of rotis, but again you need to produce more because the tawa is already hot out there. Tawa is already hot out there. What will you will do? What you will do, because it improves the economies of scale out there. It will improve the economies of scale as the gas is the maintain is same, but the per unit cost will reduce down. The per unit cost will reduce down. That's the economies of scale out there. Per unit of cost will reduce down. I hope you got this. I hope you got this. That economies of scale is a major problem. Again, sir, they don't have a bargaining power. Again, they don't have a bargaining power as most of these people, as most of them are small farmers out there. Most of them are small farmers out there. I hope you got this. I hope you got this. Most of them are small farmers out there. Most of them are small farmers out there. So what we need is that we need to consolidate the lands, consolidate the land. And why we have so much of farmers that are small in nature, sir? Of course, it comes down to the succession policy. It comes down to succession policy. Uh, with the father, there has been a several sons out there. It got distributed again within sons, their sons. The property got again distributed. As a result, it comes down to very small. It comes down to a very small land out there that we are feeling with, and that's a very appropriate problem out there, very serious problem out there, because the problem is with economies of scale, low bargaining power, and again you don't have too much of output to sell that in the market. You don't have too much of output to sell in the market. I mean, if there is a small land, how will you run a tractor over it? How will you run a tractor over it? Then again there is a problem of limited application of technology. Limited application of technology. Limited application of technology. I hope you got this. I hope you got this point. Okay, I hope you got this point out there. So the point is, that's one of the problems out there for agriculture out there. That's a small fragmented land holdings. Irrigation inefficiency. Only 40% of a net sown area is irrigated. Only 40% of the net sown area is irrigated. Severe groundwater depletion affects 17% of blocks, exacerbated by inefficient irrigation methods, leading to unsustainable water extraction. Unsustainable water extraction out there. So it leads to what we call as a irrigation inefficiency. Either it's very less or either it's too much. Either it's too much. For too much of irrigation, it leads to salinity of soil. It leads to salinity of soil. It leads to salinity of soil out there. I hope you got this point. Again, I hope you got this point out there. I hope you got this point out there. Salinity issue is there. Salinity issue is there if there is an over irrigation process out there. Soil health degradation. It's leading to this imbalance fertilizer use, particularly high nitrogen and low phosphorus, leads to soil health degradation. Leads to soil health degradation. Soil health degradation out there. I hope you got this. I hope you got this. Now, sir, there has been a lot of problems out there as well. Forget about the PPT. There has been a problem with the MSP. There has been a problem with the MSP out there. That's minimum support price. That's minimum support price. It's a subsidy out there. It's a subsidy. It's revenue expenditure which doesn't lead to any growth out there. It's a revenue expenditure. Revenue expenditure which doesn't lead to any growth out there. Which doesn't lead to any growth out there. Okay, I got it. Which doesn't lead to any. It's a revenue expenditure out there. revenue expenditure out there. I hope you got this point. I hope you got this point. Okay. I hope you got this point. Now the problem with the MSP is that, sir, it's been extracted. It's been extracted by the large farmers out there. It's been extracted by the large farmers out there. Again, it's a beneficiary issue. It's a beneficiary issue. The one who deserves that doesn't get any sort of thing. One who doesn't deserve that getting a lot of MSP, getting a lot of MSP. Again, so the problem with the MSP is that it's been announced for the 25 crops. It's been announced for the 25 crops out there, including sugarcane. Including sugarcane. But it's only applicable on ground for two crops. Only applicable to two crops. Wheat and rice. Wheat and rice. I hope you got this. Now, sir, with application of MSP on only two crops, with application of MSP on only two crops, that is wheat and rice out there. That is wheat and rice out there. The problem is that it leads to it encourage a farmer to grow only these two crops. It will lead to oversupply of wheat and rice. It will lead to oversupply of wheat and rice out there. Oversupply, and ultimately it will reduce on lot of things for them, but it will undersupply the other important stuff out there. Undersupply the other stuff out there. Undersupply the other stuff out there. What's undersupply of the other stuff out there? For example, if farmers will encourage to produce only wheat and rice out there, if farmers will be encouraged to produce only wheat and rice out there, it will encourage to produce only wheat and rice out there. The point is, it will lead to undersupply of other things called horticulture and all these stuff. Horticulture and other stuff. Horticulture and other stuff. It will lead to automatically inflation of these products. Lead to inflation of these products. Inflation of these products out there. Inflation of these products out there. It will lead to inflation of these products out there. Ultimately, it will hamper the small farmer. It will ultimately hamper the small farmer. It distorts market to some extent. Small farmer or distorts market or distorts market. Distort market out there. Distort market out there. Ultimately, it distorts market out there because only two products are being grown by the farmers out there. Ultimately, lead to a decline in the supply of other essential crops, which eventually lead to rise in the CPI, what we called as a consumer price index. What we called as a consumer price index. Let's continue from this, sir. Let's continue from this. As you know that we are discussing about the problems of agriculture out there, and we were discussing about the MSP out there. So again, sir, it's been only offered on the two crops out there. It's only offered on the two crops out there. Basically, wheat and rice. What will lead to a undersupply of other crops or undersupply of other crops, which will eventually lead to a CPI, rise in a CPI. That's called the Consumer Price Index, and inflation out there. Sir, this will eventually hurt what? This will eventually hurt someone. This will eventually hurt someone. Hurt who? It will eventually hurt those small farmers out there. Eventually hurt those small farmers out there. Eventually hurt those small farmers out there. Eventually hurt. Eventually hurt those small farmers because they are the ultimate consumers out there in the economy. If they're gonna buy certain food out there, it automatically leads to they are paying for more. They're paying more out there because of inflation, because of this distortion in the market out there, because of this distortion in the market out there. Another problem is, sir, another problem is that growing same crop of wheat and rice, it leads to a practice of monoculture out there. It leads to a practice of monoculture out there. It leads to a practice of monoculture out there. Now, the monoculture is one of the very disturbing practices out there when it comes to soil rejuvenation. When it comes to soil rejuvenation, because it distorts the quality of destroys the quality of soil out there. It distorts the or destroys the quality of soil out there. How? So as you know that must have studied in geography out there that NPK ratio 4:2. Again, let's come out back. It lead to a soil rejuvenation out there. Wheat and rice. It will lead to eventually fall down in the ratio of NPK, that is 4:2:1. That will eventually lead to soil deterioration. So monoculture practices eventually lead to a soil will eventually lead to a soil deterioration out there. All these practices hamper the productivity of soil out there. Hamper the productivity of soil out there. Take an example. If you only grow rice out there, it will eventually lead to what we call as a soil salinity. It will eventually lead to, because it again requires a lot of water intensive crop out there. It's a water intensive crop out there that requires a lot of water out there, which will eventually lead to soil salinity as well. Eventually lead to soil salinity as well. Which will eventually lead to soil salinity out there. So I hope you got these points out there. I hope you got these points out there. The problem is that we are not considering that problem. It's an environmental issue out there. It's an environmental issue out there that's been caused because of the failure of MSP. Caused by the failure of MSP. Another thing, it leads to MSP, what it does lead to is a food wastage. MSP leads to food wastage. Eventually lead to food wastage out there. Eventually lead to eventually lead to food wastage out there. What will eventually lead to a food wastage? What eventually lead to a food wastage? What will eventually lead to food wastage? Sir, possibly they acquire, the Food Corporation of India acquire a lot of what we call as a food grains. A lot of food grains out there, but they don't have enough space, don't have enough space or warehouse, don't have enough space or warehouse, don't have enough space or what we call as a warehouse out there to store these grains, to store these grains out there. If you don't have too much of what we call as a storage capacity or warehouse capacity out there to store these grains, it will eventually lead to food wastage out there, which even WHO recognized that India is one of the major food wasters out there in the world. One of the major food wasters out there in the world. So all these stuff lead to what we call as a food wastage. In a country where 80 crore people totally depends upon the PDS system out there, you can't waste all that food out there. You can't just waste all that food out there. Again, that's a problem. And how it stores, how FCI stores all these stuff on a cover and plinth. Cover and plinth mechanism. Cover and plinth mechanism. Cover and plinth mechanism is vulnerable to the environmental degradation out there. Vulnerable to the environment extremes out there. Vulnerable to the environment extremes out there. I hope you got this point out there. It's a pretty much clear. It's a very simple. Let's move on to the next thing. Structure challenge. Again, before coming to this, there's another problem that MSP creates, or even subsidies create out there, it leads to leakages. It leads to leakages of goods and services. It leads to leakages of goods out there. Leads to leakages out there. Leads to leakages out there. Leads to leakages out there. How? So take example of a urea out there. Take example of urea out there. Take example of urea. It's a fertilizer out there. It's a fertilizer out there. And so trust me, for example, if government says, okay, shopkeeper, look, you need to offer this urea. You need to offer this urea at 5 rupees a kg. ₹5 a kg, but international price of urea. International price of urea. But international price of urea is 20 rupees a kg. It's 20 rupees a kg. Now the point is, it's 20 rupees a kg. Now the point is, sir, this shopkeeper will eventually drift or leakage or provide a leakage through this urea to international prices like international markets like Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. Sri Lanka and Bangladesh out there. Now the point is, sir, if it's drifting or leaking certain amount of what we call a urea to the international market and claiming by the government that, oh, I'm providing this to a small farmers out there. Now, subsidy will be again 20 minus 5 will be 15 rupees. And this, he's earning from both ends. One from the international market out here for 20 rupees a kg. For 20 rupees a kg and another at 15 rupees that he's getting from government as a subsidy amount. As a subsidy amount. As a subsidy amount there. I hope you got this point. I hope you got this. What's the issue with all of these stuff? What's the issue with all of this stuff? Then there is another issue called the calculation of MSP. Why farmers are protesting out there? Because again, it's not been legalized. It's just a program or a policy out there for the government. It doesn't have any sort of legal. The first is A2. A2 is nothing but what we called as a, obviously, how will you calculate that? A2 is nothing but how you will give back. That is coverage of raw material coverage. Raw material coverage. Again, you're gonna adjust this into account while calculating MSP. You need to provide the cost that's been bear by the farmer out there. So raw material cost. So raw material cost out there. What another thing? What else? Raw material cost. Another thing is, so again, there has been what we call a production cost or a factors of production or a production cost out there. Production cost out there. The another thing, of course, you're gonna calculate this and pay to these FL. Farmers have put in their labor out there, and you always put what we call a labor cost out there. Always calculate the labor cost. 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 Production cost, labor cost. Labor cost, what it leads to FL. What it leads to FL. Again, so there's another cost called C. Farmers often claim that, okay, we are doing it in our own land. We are doing a production on a farming on our own land. If we don't have that land, we would have paid what we call as a rental income. But because we are doing it on our own land, we need that income as well. So rental income foregone. They need rental income foregone. Rental income for. Okay, so this is how you calculate, but this is not included at this moment. Farmers want that, but government doesn't include that in this moment. So it is nothing but A2 plus FL plus 50% over A2 plus FL. 50% over A2 plus FL. That's a formula how government calculates MSP out there. How government calculates MSP out there. How government calculates MSP out there. How government calculates MSP, minimum support price out there. Minimum support price out there. That's how things work. And again, it's been calculated, and there has been a protest by the farmers to include C costs as well, because they want their rental income foregone in their bank account. It has its own reason. It has its own reason out there. Is it too much? No. It doesn't need to increase. Yes. But again, sir, MSP is subsidy out there. It's a revenue expenditure. It's a revenue expenditure, and too much of revenue expenditure is not healthy for the economy. Not healthy for the economy out there. I hope you got these points out there. I hope you got these points. Let me give you another instant for this. These are certain problems that's been associated with the MSP out there. Now, coming back to the structural challenges, there has been, sir, APMC dominance. This is called a mandis. APMC mandis, agriculture produce marketing committees out there. Agriculture produce marketing committees. This is called mandis. APMC mandis. APMC mandi out there. What eventually it leads to? What we called as APMC mandi. it leads to, for example, in Delhi, there is called Azadpur Mandi out there. It's called Azadpur Mandi out there. It's lead to Azadpur Mandi out there. But the problem is, sir, whenever a farmer takes his produce, takes his produce, farmer takes his produce to what we called as, whenever farmer takes his produce to what we called as, to mandis, to mandi. Obviously, there would have been several traders out there, T1, T2, T3. Now they put on the bidding out there. They put out a bidding out there for this produce. Say for example, T1 says, okay, let me give you 10 rupees a kg. But you will, of course, farmer would sell to who is offering more price out there. T2 would say, okay, I'm also paying 10 rupees a kg. He also says that's 10 rupees a kg. This has been a cartel. They are not offering any sort of appreciation of price. They're offering the same price. That's called a cartel out there. That's called a cartelization. That's called a cartelization process out there. That leads to a cartelization process out there. That leads to a cartelization process out there. That leads to a cartelization process out there. Okay. That leads to a cartelization process out there because they have been doing same thing over and over again. They've been doing same over and over again. The process is, this is one of the problems that's been facing by the farmers in the APMC mandi. That's been facing by the farmers in the APMC mandi out there. Example, 8.1% in limiting farmers' choice and reducing their income share. Limited farmer credit. A significant 40-50% of farmers rely on informal source of money lenders as they are considered as a thin file client. Thin file client. They are considered to be a thin file client out there. Significant 40-50% of farmers rely on informal sources like money lenders due to inadequate access to forward credit, leading to they are thin file clients. They don't have too much of resources out there, don't have too much of government documents out there. But sir, eventually it will help them. What they don't get too much of formal loans out from the banks out there. As a result, they get too much of loan, rely on too much of on informal sector out there, who approximately gave loan of nothing less than a 27 to 29% out there. It will nothing but eventually lead to a debt trap. It will eventually lead to a debt trap. Because once you raise a loan of 27 to 29%, you have to pay. It's generational trauma out there. It's a generational trauma out there. Not only you, your son, your grandson will pay this out there. And again, there is no escape from that. There is no escape from that as a result. No escape from that. Inadequate storage, as we have discussed. Poor post-harvest infrastructure. Farmers don't have infrastructure. More than 80% are small farmers out there. Results in 10 to 16% grain losses and 20 to 30% perishable losses. 10 to 16% what we call as a grain losses. And 20 to 16%, 20-30% perishable losses, severely impacting farmers' income. I hope you got these. Another structural challenge, low mechanization. Farm mechanization strongs very low because again, how will you run a tractor on a less than 2 acre land? That's impossible. Poor supply chains has been there. Logistics is absolutely pathetic. There is no last mile connectivity. Only 13 to 14% of the GDP is logistics costs out there. When you compare this with earlier, what we called as with the advanced economies, it's nothing but 6 to 7% of logistics costs. 6 to 7% of logistics costs. Logistics costs out there. Okay. Limited agri-tech. Limited agri-tech adoption. Again, farmers doesn't have too much of a digital literacy, all these stuff out there. Digital literacy and access to advanced farming technology remains low, particularly for smallholders holding modern agriculture practices out there. These are certain problems again that's been associated with the farmers out there. We have been taking reforms like strengthening farmer producer organization, contract farming has been, and that's a different issue. But at this moment, what we are facing as a community out there, what other people are facing is a low productivity, low income. No, it's a seasonal unemployment, disguised unemployment, all these stuff. Another thing is that we are not getting a due return. There has been a middleman that's been exploiting small farmers. No source of economies of scale. So all these things are exploiting farmers too much. I hope you got these points out there. Let's be clear. That's a problem that's been faced by the farmers over a period of time. Thanks for this.